afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Advancing Gender Opportunities in Philly's New Normal panel. Thanks so much for joining us. I know it's the end of the day. It's probably been a busy one, but we're thrilled that you're still here with us. My name is Diana. I'm here from 17 Asset Management. We're one of the hosts of your event today, and we're excited to welcome you. So I will just go through a couple of quick housekeeping items to get us set up, and then we'll dive right in, and I'll turn it over to Roxanne to begin our panel. So firstly, as you're coming in, you'll notice you are on video. Please mute yourself and feel free to leave your video on or turn it off. Our speakers will be on the video the entire time. You can use the chat feature to send any Q&A or any other comments or just drive conversations, engage with us during the event. We'd love to hear your thoughts and your perspectives. That's been a great thing for us so far, so please keep that up. And then also, if you haven't filled out your Pathable profile yet, there's still time to do that and there is still value to it. We'll be networking after this at our virtual happy hour, and we would love to kind of learn more about you, what your interests are, what your feedback is from the event, kind of get to know who our audience has been and what the day has meant for you. So please just, sit back and enjoy and get engaged with us, and then hopefully, again, you'll stick around for the virtual happy hour, which is happening right after this. So with that, I will turn it over to Roxanne to kick off our Advancing Gender Opportunities in Philly's New Normal.
Hello. I am Roxanne Patel Shepelavy, executive editor of the Philadelphia Citizen, which is a nonprofit civic-minded media outlet that pairs solutions-oriented journalism and thought leader events with calls to civic action, with the aim to revive citizenship and democracy in the city of Philadelphia. I'm really happy to be here. And welcome to all of you. I hope we are an almost good cap, or a good almost cap to your experience at the forum over the last 2 days. We are going to talk about women, and before we start that, I wanted to give you a little sense of sort of the situation for women in Philadelphia before we went into quarantine. So it went a little bit like this. Women make up 18% of board seats of public companies in Philadelphia. Of the 25 highest paid executives in the region, only one is a woman. Only 20% of VC money goes to woman-owned companies. We've never had a woman as mayor or city council president in Philadelphia. The state has never had a woman as governor or senator. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, the poorest big city in America, the largest group living in poverty is women between 25 and 34 years old. More than 40% of families are headed by single mothers, 60% of whom lived in poverty even before the pandemic started. The situation now is only slightly different in that many of these women have jobs they can and must still go to. Nationally, 1 in 3 jobs held by women has been designated as essential, particularly those jobs held by women of color. And as it ever was, those jobs put them at risk and are often among the lowest paid: home healthcare workers, essential retail workers, cleaners, caretakers. We are watching as the people we value the least in compensation have become the people we need the most. That need is not different. We've always needed them. Noticing them is the part that's new. And it's not something we should waste. Now is the time to think about how women and women's work rank in Philadelphia, where opportunities for economic growth and stability lie, where change can happen to ensure that women are succeeding. Because as studies have shown all over the world, women's success is the linchpin for the success of the communities in which they live. So the question before us today, for all the panelists and everyone here, is this: how can we take the lessons that we've learned from COVID-19, from what has become visible to so many of us for maybe the first time, and make the changes needed to ensure that women in Philadelphia are afforded the opportunities to achieve economic equity and growth? I'm going to turn to our panelists to help us find our way towards an answer. And we are hoping that all of you will also join us in the conversation. So I am hoping that I'll talk to them for maybe 30 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, and then we're going to open it up to your questions. So first we have Diane Cornman-Levy. Diane, can you wave at people? There you who brings more than 30 years of nonprofit leadership, coalition building, community organizing, and fundraising experience to Women's Way, a Philadelphia-based organization dedicated to the advancement of women and girls. A tireless advocate for gender equity, Diane joined Women's Way in January 2017 after running for state representative of the 168th District. Diane was also co-founder and executive director of two nonprofits, both of which work to improve education and economic equity for families. In each of these positions, she has challenged the status quo through forging cross-sector partnerships and designing new programs that increase economic and education opportunities for families, teens, self-taught artists with mental health challenges, and returning citizens. And we'll talk to Diane about some of those programs in a little bit. Jennifer Rodriguez, who is to Diane's left on my screen, has worked to empower underserved groups for the last 20 years by helping amplify their voice and increase their engagement at the city and regional levels. In her role as the president and CEO of the Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber and regional representative for the board of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, she focuses on initiatives that close the gap for Latinos in the economy. Her work centers on advocating for the 22,000 plus Hispanic-owned businesses in the region and supporting the advancement of Hispanic professionals in the corporate sector. And Mimi Drake serves as co-CEO of Permit Capital Advisors, an investment advisory firm in the area that has expertise across a variety of allocations, including impact and mission-aligned investments. Mimi was also a founding board member of 100 Women in Finance, the largest association for women in financial services with over 15,000 members in 24 locations around the world. Mimi served on this board for 17 years, including a 4-year term as chair of the board, and is now chair emerita. Throughout the years, this organization has advanced the interests of women at all stages of their careers and in all aspects of the industry. So I'd like to start with Diane. I rattled off some stats about women in Philadelphia. From the work you do, can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen as some of the biggest drivers of the wealth gap in Philadelphia?
Yes, and thank you. I'm really delighted to be here, and I've participated in a lot of sessions, and it's been an amazing forum so far. So I'm happy to end it with talking about gender equity issues. So we really at Women's Way focus on the gender wealth gap, which is really, wealth is really more important than income. Income is part of it, but really creating assets for women and families is critical. And what we've learned through our work and also being part of national coalitions that are doing this work, that women really lack access to what we call the wealth escalator. And that's a term coined to describe the mechanism that gives some people wealth building advantages that others do not receive. And some of the key factors that really lead to this lack of access to wealth is, one is occupational segregation. You've already talked about this a little bit, Roxanne, with your introduction, that many of the jobs that are predominantly held by women, especially Black and brown women, are in the hospitality, retail, and healthcare sectors. And many of these jobs that make up these industries provide low wages and have limited access to employment benefits such as retirement accounts, health insurance, paid sick vacation days, disability, and other wealth building opportunities. So this really drives both kind of the income and wealth gap. And to date, working women, in particular, women of color and immigrant women, have been on the front line of this pandemic and the resulting economic fallout. So not only are they the majority of the workforce most at risk for exposure to the virus, such as registered nurses, 88% of whom are women, and grocery store cashiers, 66% of whom are women, but they are also concentrated in sectors with the largest number of layoffs. So retail, cashiers, salespeople, 77% of whom are women, and restaurant workers, 70% of whom are women, have been laid off. So they're really being hit hard prior to the pandemic, but now during this pandemic. And new data revealed today that the population that has been hit hardest by this pandemic is Latinx women, where the unemployment rate now is about 20.2%, which is 1 out of 5 Latinx women are now unemployed. And then another big driver of this gender wealth gap, that doing low wage work on top of unwaged caregiving work is a driver. So while our hospitals and nursing homes and child care centers are primarily staffed by women, the other component of the care workforce is the caregivers at home, another invisible labor force. So with a steady rise in healthcare costs and the lack of universal healthcare, the home has become the new hospital, staffed by millions of unpaid family caregivers doing medical jobs, and the majority of whom are women. So as more Americans lose their jobs and access to health benefits, in fact, I think it's now 33 million Americans have applied for unemployment benefits due to the pandemic, the care workforce at home will be further burdened with addressing the escalating healthcare needs of their family members. So women literally have to leave the workforce to take care of people, whether it's their child, their parent, their spouse. And according to the GDP and the Federal Reserve, none of those millions of caregivers are actually working, because if they do not get a paycheck, then one is not working. And this hides one of the greatest truths in the world, that women do 2/3 of the world's work, and perpetuate one of the greatest injustices, that women get only 5% of the income. Then the other burden is childcare costs. Between 2010 and 2019, the cost of childcare increased 24%, while the median wage for women only increased 17%. So the burden of childcare for low-income partners is particularly steep. So families with incomes below the poverty level spend 36% of their income on childcare expenses alone. And there's a new report, it's called the Self-Sufficiency Standard Report. I don't know if anyone knows about it, and I'll be glad to provide a link to it. But this is a report that is really more geographically based and based on the design of families. And it's now been done in 41 states, including Pennsylvania. And it's shown that households with children in Pennsylvania are at greater risk of not meeting their basic needs, and accounting for more than half the households with inadequate income. 53% are single female households. So the high cost of childcare is really leaving a lot of low-income working parents, especially single parents, with little money left over to make ends meet, and likely leaves next to nothing left over to save or invest. And then there's current and historical barriers to accessing home ownership and capital to grow their businesses, and we've heard this in other sessions. Women have greater difficulty in securing loans to purchase homes, which is due to historic gender and racial biases and ongoing biases that continue to have discriminatory effect. Women are being charged more for home mortgages loans and denied mortgages more often, despite they do have stronger repayment histories than men. And then compounding this problem is the huge lack of affordable housing, which denies many women access to one of the most common forms of assets for Americans, which is home ownership. Mm-hmm. And then respect to accessing capital to grow their businesses, women in many states could not obtain a business loan without a signature from a male until the Women's Business Ownership Act was passed in 1988. That's not that long ago, that women had to have a signature from a man to get a loan for a business. So that's been changed. So there's fewer legal restrictions, but they continue to face a lot of major obstacles still in obtaining financing on the same terms and under the same conditions as men. Just a couple of stats. Women-owned businesses receive about 16% of conventional financing. This, in 2017, only about 2% of the $85 billion raised through venture capital in the United States went to female-founded startups. Black women founders only receive 0.2% of all venture deals. And when women are able to secure financing, they attain lower levels of funding compared to men. So in 2017, the average funded business loan for women-owned firms was $57,000, just a little over that. And it went down from $99,000 in 2016, so it actually went down. And in comparison, the average size for a business loan for male entrepreneurs remains stable at a little over $100,000. So these discriminatory practices are really making it difficult for women-owned, particularly women of color-owned businesses, to really have access to capital. And we see this happening, but there's a lot of interesting things happening and good things that are happening. And then a couple other things. A lot of women have lack of access to networks and mentors. And entrepreneurs it really helps entrepreneurs navigate the challenges of business ownership. And so many women still report that they have trouble finding other women as mentors. And part of it is because women just have not been in that field as long and don't feel as comfortable as mentoring other women. So we need to build more networks of women mentoring other women around entrepreneurship and business owners. And then one more point I'm going to make. There's also a lack of access to financial education and coaching. It's not in our schools. It's just not talked about. And women have a lot of not just lack of financial knowledge, but there's also gender norms that sometimes act as these hidden barriers, like saying, I don't really know how to do finances. I don't know if I'm worthy of it. I don't know if I'm capable of it. So providing greater access to financial coaching and education will really help women as well. There's other things, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, that's great. Jennifer, Diane talked a little bit about, well, two things. She talked about Latina women and sort of what they are experiencing now, but also about women-owned businesses, and particularly businesses owned by women of color. So let me ask you about that a little bit. Do you know, so I sort of have two questions. Or what percentage of the businesses in the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce are owned by women? And what seemed to be the biggest barrier to their growing those businesses?
Sure. So good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for having me here. The forum has been, I've been in a couple of sessions, has been great. I'm happy to be in company of such intelligent and eloquent people. So what I will say is about 44% of our members or businesses are Latina owned, and that tracks with them national. What we find as that Latinas are really, Latinos in general are the most entrepreneurial demographic. Latinos are starting businesses at 3 times the national average, even when in other demographics, entrepreneurship and business formation has been decreasing. And actually during the last major recession, it was Latino businesses that sort of kept entrepreneurship in the country. There's about 4 million Latino-owned businesses in the nation. Now, the growth, 60% of the growth in new business creation in the Latino community can be attributed to females, right? So really it's Latinas who are driving entrepreneurship in the Latino community. And why is that? That is because women are looking for flexibility, right? It's because women find that the options for them in terms of employment are too constrictive. So there is this, particularly in cities and in economies where the opportunities are so limited and where jobs and we know what the wealth gap and pay and wage gap are for females in general, entrepreneurship becomes a viable option, right? Because you can control your schedule in many instances. The problem is that Latinas do not have the confidence in themselves many times to even seek financing. So access to capital is a significant barrier for them. So even when they might be eligible for financing, we find that females are not seeking financing. They self-select out of the process and don't even seek it because they don't think they will get it. And a lot of it has to do with, again, how many businesses do you see where Latinas are, they're big businesses, right? So the scale of businesses in the Latino community is very small, and for Latinas is even smaller, right? So why is this happening? This is happening because, there is structural issues with access to capital. There are language access, there are eligibility issues with regard to capital. And home ownership is a very important key in entrepreneurship. And in the manner that a demographic group has lower levels of home ownership, they will then have fewer options for financing and for raising dollars to start and grow their businesses. So we in this country are because equity opportunities for businesses owned by people of color are so limited, by result, Latinas in business are even having fewer options. So we talk a lot about the role of homeownership in entrepreneurship, and really how, on the one hand, we need to really incentivize home ownership and make it more accessible to persons of color. But we, further than that, need to really think about what types of capital are available, because it really is unfortunate that somebody looking to start a business or grow a business must place their family in jeopardy by putting that asset on the line in order to be able to follow their dreams and start a business and grow a business. So how is it that we place women, minorities, in a situation in which they can actually take risk without jeopardizing their families, right? One thing we have learned in this in this pandemic is that the digital divide has become exacerbated, and where families really didn't have or do not have the type of digital literacy necessary to be able to apply for loans, to be able to seek financial relief, to be able to work remotely, to be able to pivot their business and innovate, right? So we're seeing all of that is really becoming exacerbated in our communities. One thing we find is that entrepreneurship education can really make a difference. And businesses that go through high quality entrepreneurship education tend to grow and tend to really employ more people and scale up at higher rates than those that do not. And this is very important because in the Latino community, only 2% of businesses generate $1 million or more in sales. That really means that the vast majority of Hispanic-owned businesses, and now we know that Latinas are 44% of those, right? Then that really means that these are micro businesses, 1- and 2-person shops. And in Philadelphia in particular, 90% of Latino-owned businesses are sole proprietorships. That means they have no employees. And that is a problem because those businesses tend to be less resilient. They tend to be subjected to the whims of the economy in ways that larger corporations are not. So a challenge in our community is really helping. I often say we do not have an entrepreneurship problem or an entrepreneurship challenge. We have a scaling challenge. How do we turn sole proprietorships, women that own their business, their hair salon, their, their consulting firm, and help them scale up so that they ultimately become more resilient in the economy. And so those are challenges that are not unique to females, but are deeper in when you layer everything and you add gender, then the challenges become exacerbated.
So you mentioned entrepreneurship education.
Yes.
So I think all of you to some degree might be involved in some of that, but I mean, is that something that the Chamber does for its members?
Yes. And so one of the things that happens is not all entrepreneurship education is created equal, right? And so there tends to be this, a lot of workshop-driven education, which is great, but what you need is that deep, long, really getting into your business type of education, where a business owner is held accountable for making changes in their operations and really taking a deep look at the finances. It's almost what we're calling these days a mini MBA kind of thing. And so there are very few of those around. Here in the city of Philadelphia, people are they know better the Goldman Sachs 10,000 program, right? That is an English program. There's not a Spanish version. We at the Hispanic Chamber have been piloting a Spanish language curriculum that is very similar in depth and breadth. It's called Accelerate Latinx. It was launched by an organization out of Boston, a nonprofit that has developed a curriculum for specifically tailored towards minority or Black and brown business owners and business owners operating in low-income communities. So it's really tailored to the needs of that population. And we have been very pleased, actually. We are in the process of graduating 15 participants that put in 40 hours of classroom work, 7 months, 100 hours of coaching and homework time. Yeah. And we have seen the difference in the way those entrepreneurs think about their business and about the opportunities that come along with it and what the levers that they need and how they need to present themselves and prepare that business for growth. And those are expensive programs for the nonprofits and governments that are looking to do them, but they are necessary, in my opinion.
Yeah. Mimi, I want to ask you about, the world that you work in is different from these sort of small businesses, but I'm interested in 100 Women in Finance and sort of why there was a need, and maybe more importantly for this discussion about how to move forward, sort of what the change was that organization has helped to usher in what is in the world of finance, which is really and I guess was especially very much a boys' club.
Sure, and you're right that the need was specific to finance, but as I hear all this conversation, it's really a global need for every sector. Yeah. And the organization was started actually 19 years ago by a group of us who felt that we needed to advance the interests of women in financial services because it just was not an equal playing field by any measure. And we said, you know what, if we want to do that, it needs to be grassroots and we need to join together. And actually, the funny name is it was aspirational. It was, wouldn't it be fun if there were 100 of us? And now, fast forward, we have 15,000 members, as you mentioned, in 24 locations around the world. So spanning out from Philadelphia, looking across, really all the continents. And what's interesting is I think the needs are actually pretty similar. And that is that in order to create change and drive towards equality, we realized that we had to look across the full spectrum from not just business leaders, but people who were even thinking about getting into the businesses. So starting at schools and talking about the industry and what that looked like and how even young people who are thinking about these careers could think about equality, could understand the issues, and they'll also be in a position to do something about them. And then everywhere in between, in mentoring women at all different stages, from early in their careers to a point that you referenced earlier, Roxanne, making sure we can get more women on boards and women in positions of influence. And so it's really an advocacy and education oriented organization. And I think one thing that's exciting, and maybe that's why they put us at the end of the day, is we need to find some things that are positive. Is I think financial services is actually a place where hopefully we will see some positive change as we see companies like BlackRock, like some of the other big institutional investors, the California investment system, for example, or people like Melinda Gates, who are really demanding that in order to make investments, people need to be investing in companies that have equitable practices. And the other thing that's nice is this topic of equality. Again, whether we're talking about Philadelphia or we're talking globally, it used to be that we talked about it from an angle of it's the right thing to do. And now we've broadened the conversation. It's not just the right thing to do, it's good business. And to use a term that we are hearing more and more these days since COVID struck, it's essential to business. So one thing that I'm excited about is I think more and more people are noticing that how essential the women are in all of these different roles that you all spoke about. And Roxanne, you said something at the beginning. You said one thing that's different is not the problem, it's the noticing that's new. We are noticing how essential a lot of women are, especially in these unsung roles. And I'm very hopeful that that will help to drive some of this positive change that we're talking about. So to get back to your question, financial services is one sector, but hopefully, the change that we are starting to see will translate to other sectors as well.
Yeah, so what I do want to do, because I think that everybody in this room here would like to walk away with some ways to help, right? Some ways to really make change. So Diana, let me ask you to tell us just briefly a couple of programs or projects, as Jennifer did with the entrepreneurship program, that you think are helping to move the needle for women. That I know that Women's Way is involved in some things. Like what are some answers to this?
Yeah, sure. So one of the shifts we did at Women's Way is, again, we're focusing more on asset building and building wealth. And what does that mean, and how do you do that? Well, first, it requires a cross-sector approach. So you have to bring different stakeholders that are part of the asset building world, which is all kinds of institutions, running from government, the private sector, businesses, financial institutions, philanthropy, and really important are women with lived experiences. Those who have experienced economic insecurity need to have their voices, their perspectives, their insights, and their solutions centered in these discussions. And then we have to make a long-term commitment to work together, because this is a complex issue and involves all of us. So we are a convener. We started the Women's Economic Security Initiative about 2.5 years ago with the goal that all women will attain financial well-being for themselves and their children. And this is not just focusing on increasing income. It's not just focusing on them getting a job, because most women that are experiencing economic insecurity are working, not just one job, but 2 jobs. So it's about building wealth and building assets. So for the past 2.5 years, we've brought stakeholders together. And again, women with lived experiences who are experts are helping us co-design solutions and strategies. And one of the things we implemented about a year ago was a financial coaching pilot program. And we've done a lot of research on what is the best method to really building the capability of women to manage finances. And it's not just workshops. It's not listening. It's really one-on-one personal coaching, because I think I think Jennifer alluded to this, that women have a lot of psychological barriers to managing finances, and it's based on a system that has really been discriminating against women, and particularly women of color. And so what coaching does, it really is a partnership model that is where the client sets goals, and it's her goals that she wants to achieve, and the coach is a partner and an accountability partner, and really helps drive and support her steps towards reaching those goals. Well, we did this. We're almost to the end of our 2-year pilot, and the impact's been profound. women are saving money, they're improving credit scores, they're creating budgets, they're actually, and really important, they're feeling really confident and empowered that they can manage their finances. And these are many low, moderate income women. And they also are investing in things like education. Some started side businesses. So this program that was a pilot, we now are going to be scaling it and training organizations across the region of how to integrate financial coaching into programs. Across different types of programs, whether it's housing counseling programs. This was originally integrated into early child care sector, and that is a sector that is really on the verge of collapse right now for many reasons, because a lot of them are small businesses that do not have cash. A lot of the employees don't get paid much. So we focused on that sector to work with the directors, the teachers, and the parents. And it's been very helpful. But now we're going through this pandemic, and I'm very concerned about the early child care sector. So that's one of the things we're doing. Another really important thing that we're about to launch, and this is something that's probably people don't think about, is about the narrative. The narrative of how we talk about women and poverty and economic insecurity. And the narratives that we've been hearing for the past several years have been really grounded in racist and sexist language, and how we punish women, like we blame them like they're victims and they don't work hard enough and they're living off the system. So we want to change the narrative of how we talk about this. So we just got a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. I probably shouldn't be saying this yet, but we did it because they haven't done a formal announcement. But we're going to be creating a fellowship program to train women with lived experiences of how to tell their stories through different formats, whether it's videos, written word, but also how to tell their stories in a way that helps change mental models of policymakers and funders and people in media. So we're really excited about launching this because I think that's an invisible part of the system that we need to change. If we don't change the way people think, we're not going to change the way they behave. And so we really believe this is a really important part of systems level change. And at the same time, we're empowering these women to really be able to tell their stories in ways that will really influence key decision makers. So those are a couple of things that we're working on at Women's Way.
That's great. Jennifer, can you tell me what you think, to kind of get the audience here thinking about what role they could play in advancing advancing women and women in business in Philadelphia? I mean, what are a couple of things that you think, and I hate to put it this way, but I guess a little bit of low-hanging fruit, like what are the things that are not so hard that we should be doing more of in order to advance more women?
So one of the things I talk about is the need for social capital and the need for entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs of color, and in this case, Latina entrepreneurs, and others, really to welcome Latinas as entrepreneurs in their networks. I think that we know, and there's no better example of what does it in this coronavirus, the idea that small businesses were not able to get funding that was expressly developed for them because they did not have a relationship with a banker, right? So it is so important to have relationships that make a difference in your success. And I think that is particularly difficult for disadvantaged communities, right? Those networks are not necessarily very rich on wealth and influence, right? And that is something that the chamber is looking to do. So if you are somebody that has a capacity of talent, I would urge you, become involved in, I would say, look, become involved in the Hispanic Chamber, become involved in Women's Way, because it is important for the women in these communities to get to know people outside of their communities that can lend a hand. We talk a lot about, I'm sorry I'm being long-winded. It's at the end of the day. My brain is a little bit short-circuited. But how many businesses that are successful, that are owned and operated by white people, right? When you tell them, when you ask them, how did you get started? And how did you get to the point where you are? They'll tell you, oh, the friend of my friend did my incorporation documents. And my father's an accountant, so he did my book for 3 years. And my friend is a techie, so they put my website together. Well, add up all of that if you're going to pay on an hourly basis or a contract, what that costs, right? It is a lot of pro bono and sort of free, resources that are required to really start a business and capitalize a business, either with dollars or with talent. And the dollar side, we don't have in our community, and the talent side is often scarce as well, right? So are you an attorney? Can you put some pro bono hours on entrepreneurship? Can you help somebody negotiate a lease? Can you help somebody get out of a bad lease, right? Particularly in these instances. Are you an accountant or a bookkeeper? Well, bookkeepers don't earn that much. I'm going for the folks that have the talent that is costly, right? And I think that makes a big difference when we at the chamber put our members in contact and match them with a professional that is willing to do the work at no cost or at very low cost. It makes an incredible difference.
Social capital is interesting because I think there's that piece, and I think even to helping to grow the business by knowing people who are able to buy your products or use your services, or sort of having the network of people is interesting.
I find that it's interesting that oftentimes, people say you need access to capital. And I said, you know how many bad business owners have gotten loans because of the person that they know,
right.
Not because their balance sheet warranted or their income statement was good enough. So you can overcome access to capital if you have social capital, right? And so I think that, they go hand in hand, but if without the social capital, you really won't get all of the other stuff that you need, right?
Yeah, interesting. So Mimi, you mentioned to me when we were speaking earlier, and you mentioned it here too, that you are feeling optimistic in this moment, and I would love to hear more about that. What makes you hopeful?
Yeah, well, certainly I'm deeply troubled by everything that's going on. But one thing that I've noticed is too often the discussion is broad-based and overwhelming and not actionable, and that is depressing to me. And what I have seen in this epidemic is people really rolling up their sleeves, whether it's helping their neighbors who can't get out, or it's supporting businesses in a way that they might not have otherwise. It's really kind of the phrase that keeps coming to mind is, if it is to be, it's up to me. Which is a quote that I think about a lot. And I think people are realizing that we really need to Jennifer's point, we need to collaborate and help each other and really make a difference. So that's the piece that I'm hopeful about. And also that, some of the programs Diane was speaking about, when people say, what can I do to help? It's back organizations like that, or what you're doing at the Citizen. It's to leverage the groups that are already doing this good work. So that's what gets me hopeful when I see things like that. When I see, Diane, the grants you're getting because you are showing the difference that you're making. So it's really that. And I hate to say that it's taken a crisis to see that, but that and more investors demanding change, more opportunities to invest in investments that have a positive impact. So there's a lot to be depressed about, but I think I'm hopeful that there's also a lot to be optimistic about.
Yeah, Roxanne, can I just say one thing about the philanthropic sector? Because we also do grant making, and just to piggyback on Mimi, for the first time in the history that I know of in the city of Philadelphia, The Philanthropy Network of Greater Philadelphia, which is a membership-based organization of all the funders in the region, are now coordinating efforts across grant making. They are sharing data. They are seeing where money is going and where it's not going. And I've never seen the philanthropic share data like this ever. And what we're learning is, which is just, it's not learning, it's kind of, we already knew this, but women-owned, particularly Black, brown, women-owned nonprofits get the least amount of funding. So we responded by creating a rapid response general operating fund that targets and gives money to nonprofits led by women of color. And our first round, 80% of those nonprofits are led by women of color. But by sharing data and bringing all the players together, we can't coordinate. We don't know where the needs are. So I think this has been really a groundbreaking under Sidney Hargrove, who actually spoke yesterday. He's a great leader, really facilitated this whole process. So I just wanted to share that. That's very hopeful to me.
And Roxanne, I would just add, a lot of companies are obviously going out of business or are really struggling. And there's been a lot written about the ones that are going to survive. People are going to pay more attention to the sustainability aspect of that. And whether that's climate or other issues, there's an important gender issue in that, right? There's data that women run businesses do better in the long term. We've talked about that. So I think people are going to pay more attention to that when we look at who's going to survive during this and thrive during this. And that's a positive too.
Yeah, for sure. So I would love to open it up to questions. Victoria, do we have questions from the audience that you can read to us?
We sure do. We've had a lot of conversation, and thank you everyone so much for getting so engaged in this. I have just seen so many really compelling comments and questions and everything. I have not done this for a single other session, but I want to call out a couple of them because they were pretty inspiring. We had one person who shared that as a Latina, she's kind of used to hustling and struggling as the norm, and kind of sees that having no access to the right networks makes a huge difference there. So I'm glad we spoke about that a lot. Other people have said they never had a woman of color as a mentor, and a lot of older white men. So I think that definitely can shape experiences too, and that was just another inspiring comment. So a couple of questions that I wanted to highlight. Here's one that was a really intriguing one. How can men who are outside of Philly city neighborhoods support changes that shift cultural norms, holding the human capital from its potential?
Well,
did I get that for a minute?
Yeah.
Thinking.
Let me read that again.
Yeah.
How can men who are outside the Philly city neighborhoods support a change, shifting the cultural norms that hold women back from their whole potential?
So the question is, how can men outside who are not sort of in the neighborhoods themselves, who maybe don't come from those communities, help to bring more social capital to women who are living in these communities?
Maybe I could start from the financial investment perspective, and then we can take other views. But one way is with their investment dollars, and to think about where their money is going and demand that the way that they are investing is a fair and equitable way. The other is to support the programs and the good work that is happening here. So I think there's a lot that everyone can do. This does not need to happen just by women. So, but I think money talks, and this is one situation where, as we've talked about, public-private sectors need to come together. Philanthropists need to come together. As Diane mentioned, people need to share information and resources in a way that we never did before. And so I don't think that matters whether you're in Philadelphia or you're not. I think everybody can be supportive of that.
Yeah, I've noticed that one of the things that I've been trying really hard to do is in this particularly right now is source locally for where I'm buying things, right? And I think that there's a deliberateness, and things sometimes take longer to get here, or there's a deliberateness to that can probably be brought to any of these communities. And so you can look for purveyors and businesses to fill your needs that are sort of outside of your circle, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that you should look about, I would not really so concentrate on Philadelphia, but I would say, are you sitting at a board? What's your social capital circle, right? Are you holding the leadership of the board of directors organizations where you sit accountable for diversity and inclusion? Are the values of those organizations aligned with conversations, for example, that we're having today? I think that you don't necessarily need to look about, where you are in Philadelphia, but really where you are, can you really think about how are these inequities playing in your backyard?
Yeah, and they're all just great suggestions, and I would recommend that you kind of step out of your comfort zone and get to know women that are doing this work, and build relationships with people that you don't traditionally build relationships with. And there are lots of opportunities to do that. And I think, Adam Landau, who's co-CEO of Permanent Capital, joined the Women's Economic Security Initiative, and he was engaged in conversations with women with lived experiences that live, in Philadelphia, and his business is in Conshohocken, and he lives in New Jersey. But through developing those relationships, he developed such a great understanding of the inequities and how he and his company can be part of the solution. And he and Mimi, they're doing great work. And it's through those human-to-human interactions and having these real honest conversations about what role we all play in driving inequities, but also what role we can play to decrease them. So there's lots of opportunities for you to come and talk to all of us and the people we work with.
Excellent. So here's another question that we have. Are there early activities for young girls and for young women in the cities to help them kind of build those necessary confidence skills, leadership skills, kind of coach them into, how to maybe start a business, things like that can really help them to grow that skill set that has, again, maybe traditionally not been as available to them?
Yeah, yes, there are. We have one group, it's called Young Women's Initiative, and it's for women ages 21 to 45. We call them young. But it is a peer network of women to come together to learn about, it's a peer-to-peer professional network, but it's also it's a way to bring together around social gatherings, also talk about issues that particularly impact women. And how do we support each other in terms of our own professional aspirations. And so that's something that's been around for how many years at Women's Way. And they have some education forums. They did one on the imposter syndrome, which is really how as women we have a lot of self-doubt and self-limiting beliefs, and how do we start to disrupt that. And there's a lot of other groups, and I don't know them names, but that are working with girls, leadership development programs that are really working with girls. And if there's anyone who's listening, like Jess Muslin might know more about some of the groups that specifically focus on leadership development of girls in the region. So if anyone can add to that, please do.
Did anyone else want to weigh in on this, or should we move on?
Yeah, so I would say that the Hispanic Chamber, we don't run, a young women programs. We have a young professional network where we have over 200 young professionals that come together, and that has a lot of females. And over the past year, we've been bringing a loose group, an informal group together that we call Latinas Who Breakfast. That get together, in the morning once every so often to really just network and get to know one another. And you see people from really, senior positions and great leadership background to very young women. And what we heard when we surveyed them is that they really are in many ways tired of really formal programming, and they need the spaces where they can build relationships, and that's what we try and do with them.
That's great. I think we might have time for one more question, or maybe two more questions.
Sure, great. Well, I will dig into one that we actually had from our 17 Asset Management co-founder and CEO, John Morris. He mentioned that we do a lot of work with refugees who've come to the United States for the first time and kind of talk about their success stories as they sort of build up a business and get started. But the examples of CEOs who really become successful and become billionaires or millionaires are always men. So he asks, how do we create the same opportunity for women refugees or immigrants who arrive in the city of Philadelphia with nothing but grit, and just create another example of getting started in Philly, but maybe don't have that same opportunity or the advantage of being male?
So what I would say is that there's a really stark statistic around immigrant entrepreneurship, and there was a report a couple of years ago. I used to be under Mayor Nutter, the mayor's executive director of Immigrant and Multicultural Affairs. And what struck me at the time was that 97% of all new businesses in our main streets between 2007 and 2013 at the time, 97% of them have been started by immigrants. And sort of like the outsized contribution of immigrants to our neighborhoods. And if you think, for those that have been in Philadelphia for a long time, how the Italian market was really in a really poor situation and was really being sort of talked about as the demise of the Italian market, has just really come back through entrepreneurship. Philadelphia particularly is a very difficult place to start and grow a business. They're just the resources and the wealth and the equity, really is a lot of regulation and a lot of red tape to go through. I think one of the things that we could do really as a city is refocus a lot of the energy that we have on really how can we support business creation, business formation, and in my opinion, more importantly, the scaling of businesses. And we need to do a better job at that, because the majority of new jobs are created by firms that have 250 employees and fewer. And that's really, small businesses, that's Latina-owned businesses, that increasingly immigrant-owned businesses. And I think really focusing on that versus focusing on, the Commerce Department budget is going to be slashed by, the reduction of 85% in this new budget. And if entrepreneurship is that important to job creation, the idea that you're cutting the Commerce Department's budget by 85% doesn't quite add up. So I think there's a lot of work to do.
You mentioned that starting a business in Philadelphia, a small business, is especially difficult. And does that have to do with I know that there's the tax code is complicated. I mean, is there?
So it's a lot of steps. So for example, immigrants particularly tend to work a lot in the hospitality and restaurant industry. And it can take you easily on average, it takes you more than 8 to 10 months from the moment you sign the lease to the moment you can open your door. You're paying your lease all throughout. You are really having to deal with really cumbersome structures and decisions and conflicting information. So it really, if you think about that, that's just a great impediment, right, in that one little industry, right?
Yeah.
I was just going to add, I think in addition to that, I think it's important to support the people like you, Roxanne, and others, the newspaper and so forth, who are telling these stories, right? Because there's the data and what's happening and how immigrants can, launch businesses and the success stories that are happening. But we need to hear the stories. And so for people to keep supporting people like you and others who are sharing those stories is just as important.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add, I think we need to invest more in the CDFIs. There's the NATA Enterprise Center, Women's Opportunity Resource Center, and they are targeting women-owned, immigrant-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. And they need to get more money invested in their work, not just in terms of capital, but also I think partnering with the philanthropic sector to actually provide funds for what, Jennifer, you talked about, that mentoring. And all the other things, not just money, but what other supports that these new business owners need to help them start and grow their business. So I think a partnership with the philanthropic sector, also nonprofits that know the community, that have trust for that community, can provide their support. But again, that's more investment needs to be channeled into the CDFIs to focus more, to increase both capital and also to provide additional resources for around mentoring and business, financial, technical support. So those are things I think would be really helpful.
And frankly, we need equity investments. We need loans are not the way to start a business, right? And so, there's a type of capital at every stage of your business. And usually starting a business with a loan is just not really a good match. And that's where you find a lot of immigrant businesses, a lot of businesses of color, because that's the only option they have. We really need to think about how do we infuse other types of capital, equity investment, flexible debt products and such, if we really want this part of our community to thrive.
And just real quickly, the Enterprise Center is just starting an initiative with investing equity investments into these small businesses. Correct. So I would definitely talk to the Sophie, working on her last name, at the Enterprise Center.
Della Clark.
Thank you. Della Clark, who's the head of the Enterprise Center, about what they're doing, because I think it's a fascinating model.
Great. I think we might have time for one more, if there's a good question to end on.
Sure. Let me just pull this back up again. I had found one that someone had asked. We've kind of spoken about this a little bit because we've talked about the narrative and how that needs to change. And we have a question saying, how can we address the fact that the kinds of questions women are asked are fundamentally different from those that are asked of men anyway? So men are asked, how will you succeed? And women who are maybe, founders of their own businesses are asked, how will you not fail? So how do we shift, maybe it's a media outlook or something, but how do we shift that in our narrative?
Mimi, let me ask, is that your experience, that that's how you think questions are phrased when women are asking for investment?
I do think, unfortunately, that is asked or implied, which might be worse. I think pointing to the data, right? The data actually shows that women are better risk managers, which is an important part of investing. So I think pointing to the data, and there's an increasing amount of data that is very positive for women. And then I think enlisting men in the conversation about that, right? Even if they're the ones asking it, I think making sure that they're educated and that they are part of that solution and have that data is helpful. One example is for panels. I mean, this is great. This is an all-female panel, but a lot of times you see all male panels. And what I've asked some friends who are in leadership positions is to say that they actually won't speak on any panels that don't have some diversity in them. So I think enlisting everybody, men included, in making sure that the investments they're making, if they're investing in these businesses, that there's equity there is important.
I mean, would you suggest that
lower change than I would like, but
would you suggest that women who are looking for investment have a slide that just addresses that up front, saying, by the way, companies that are owned by women are a better bet for your money because of X, Y, and Z?
I actually don't. And there's so many views on this. So the caveat is this is mine, but there are people who have different views. I actually don't suggest leading with it, because nobody leads with, I'm a male-owned business. And so I think the point is these businesses are successful and promising and worthy of investment regardless. Now, I think it's important to be armed with the data. Yeah. But I think it can almost appear concessionary, and that's not the point. So I always suggest, investing in women-owned businesses is good business, and so keep it to the business facts. But that said, be armed with the data, because whether it comes up explicitly or implicitly, I think it's important to address.
To have it like as a secret track on your slideshow that you can pull up if you need
Yeah,
to.
exactly. And hope that you're speaking to an audience that doesn't think that way.
Yeah.
So.
That's great. Unless anybody has anything they want to say to close, I think this has been really interesting. I hope everybody got some ideas for how to move forward, which is really what I was hoping we could come away with this from. Thanks to all of you for joining us, all three of you on the panel, and thank you to everybody who stayed for the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Roxanne, Mimi, Jennifer, Diane. Thank you all for being here, and thank you again to everyone else. We invite all of you to join us for our virtual happy hour after this. I think many of us have been in sessions all day long, so could probably use that. And we look forward to keeping the conversations going. This was excellent. Thank you.